Suicide Zen Forgiveness, the pod that shares the stories of those affected by suicide. Lost a loved one? Attempted it yourself? Did you know that when you share a burden, the load is lightened? Come listen in with your host, Elaine Lindsay.
Suicide Zen Forgiveness, the podcast, is for education only. Some of the subject matter could be triggering for those that are newly grieving or in a poor state of mental health. Please call your local suicide hotline or mental health office if you need immediate help. Hello. It's wonderful to be back with you today. I am Elaine Lindsay, and this is Suicide Zen Forgiveness. Today, we have what I consider an absolute gift of a guest, and it's going to be, to me, a little more positive and uplifting. We share some very, very painful stories, and we do come out the other end with hope and looking towards the future. But today, we're starting in that place of hope and what we can do positively for ourselves. And without further ado, I would like to tell you a little bit about my guest. My guest is Sarah Sparks. I'm actually going to read her bio because I really want you to get the gist and the depths of who she is. So Sarah Sparks, MPA, is a highly sought after spiritual business advisor. She's the director of Spiritual Life, Community and Belonging, and she's the founder of Create the Spark, LLC. Sarah is an international best-selling author, podcast host of a top 10% nationally ranked podcast, and she's a successful business owner who's here on this earth to teach professionals how to lead with their soul by listening to their divine guidance. Sarah believes you are extraordinary and meant for more, and she can help you know why you're here so you can live the life you're meant to live. Without further ado, here is Sarah.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, I love it I love the introduction. And, it still is so weird for me to even hear my own bio because sometimes in my own head, I'm just Sarah Sparks. I'm still just that farm-raised, college-educated, former local government employee turned business owner chick,
I love that. And that's part of what drew me to you, because you're wholesome and you're welcoming and you're empathetic and you're kind and you are always in service. And that, to me, is the epitome of what the better me I'm aiming for strives for, is to be. To me, it's like you're constantly in joy.
Well, I appreciate that. And I also would like to be even more honest with you. I'm not always a joy. I may seem like that, but there are moments that I have a daughter, Joy, who's 5, and she sometimes takes me out of, or I get out of joy based on her reaction.
Yes.
Like this morning when she wouldn't eat breakfast and we had to leave in a matter of 5 minutes. Those moments are not a joy. Oh, I know. I won't always. I feel like at some point in my life, I won't always be so. Let's break it down. I don't know. I sometimes feel like I downplay what people are sharing with me, and I'll work on that.
No, and the whole reason I asked that is exactly for what you answered me, because people tend to look at us and only see the shiny, lovely bits.
Mhm.
But I know you're human. I know you have a 5-year-old, and I don't care how good your child is. There are days where they can try your patience,
Yes.
but you are so genuine.
Mhm.
You immediately took the time to set us on the right path. And that's exactly what I was hoping for.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Because too many
Mhm.
times people do just give us the good,
Yeah.
and that was not what I was saying.
Oh, no, and, if I may just insert my own experience with that,
Yes.
there was many moments, but when I had my first, my oldest daughter is, 9 and a half now, and when I first had her, I went into postpartum depression, and I stayed there for 16 months. Part of that was not to, like, there was multiple factors to that, but one of them was that I had this expectation that when I had a child, they're going to sleep through the night, and the commercials were all like a baby floating on a cloud.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
wasn't a commercial of my child having colic and screaming for 4 hours for 6 weeks in a row every single night. I mean, what in the test your mental strength of things. I was like, I think I'm going. And right before I had her, my business was booming and filled. And I had 5 speaking events every single month, and I had clients, and it was filled to the point that in 2000, I had her in 13, at the end of 13, 14, and part of 15. I was like, I don't care if you're happy because I'm not happy. And oh my gosh, and I never want to share that with her because I don't want to be like, oh, you did, like, because some parents, I think, like, oh, you're the worst birth I've ever had. And I'm like, oh, please, let's not put that on the child, but whew, yeah. So I had this expectation that life would be wonderful. And then, I had all these baby showers and people giving me these cute little shoes and things. Children don't want to wear shoes.
No, they do not.
Babies don't want to wear shoes.
No.
Don't get people shoes. Just don't.
No.
Like, maybe not even socks, because
Definitely no shoes, no socks. I'm with you there, because you leave them littered through your day. Wherever you may be, you will find a sock or a shoe.
Yes.
And when they're really little, and you put those stupid mittens on so they don't scratch themselves,
yes.
those too will be in that trail.
I remember leaving those little mittens on for like, a good 2 days. Can't do that either.
No, you cannot.
And there was
comes
blood
off.
in between her hands. And I was like, oops. I mean, like, new mom. Oh my gosh. But again, I look from outside looking in, never had kids, never babysat. I wasn't this person that was like, I love children. Can I hold your baby? I was like, yeah, that's good. You do you. Good job. But once I had my own, and their little souls chose me, Amira's soul chose Craig, my husband, and I 3 years prior to her even coming. She gave us a message. She told us what to name her. She says, whenever you guys are ready, I'll come. He and I had a conversation and was like, I think we're ready. She was conceived, and then and then out came Amira and Naomi. So, so she chose us, and having that experience gave me enough courage to be like, okay, I can be a mama, but I still had the expectation back to the outside looking in that everything is perfect. And then I got it handed to me. Like, no, it's not perfect. And what are you going to do with it? And I think that's a good question about life. Like, hey, life is not perfect. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah. And the fact is, they don't come with a manual. Okay. And no 2 babies are the same.
My 2 children are the exact opposite.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I feel for you. My sister had colic, and it was hard on all of us, to the extent that they bought me a present, and rewrapped it, gave it back to them, and said, "Here, I'll give this back if you take that back."
Was it headphones?
No, it should have been. They didn't have headphones in those days. And God rest her soul, my sister never let me forget it. That was a story we often told people, that I really didn't want her. I was bound and determined on being an only child. It's not so great to be an only child. I can tell you, at the late age of 65, it was not what I wanted, but it gave us both a good laugh for many years. The concept of postpartum depression is actually a really good place to start, I believe, because it can totally mess with your head. It can, people, I know people who were worried for their own safety or worried for the safety of their child. It is not something to trifle with. And I think probably it's important that you get help.
Yeah, for sure. I think many things contributed to my state of mental. I felt like I had to do it all. I was breastfeeding, so the baby was on me every 2 hours, but then she only wanted to sleep on me. So then there was that. So she was literally eating, sleeping, pooping on me. And I was used to meditating I was in my 30s when I had her. So I would meditate, I would help others, I would do speaking events. I had time with my husband. His love language is quality of time and physical touch. Well, when I've been touched all day by a child, there wasn't much physical touch going on. And then quality of time, there wasn't any. So then he wasn't feeling love. So then he would have his own experiences trying to fulfill those. And then I would take that personal. And I had all these tools. I mean, I was teaching them, but when I didn't feel supported, when I didn't feel loved, and then I wasn't getting to be me, like who I had gotten to know, I had no idea who this stay-at-home mom, non-business owner person was. Like, I was having to redefine me, and I got lost in it. And I think, so depression, anytime I have experienced depression, for me, and I cannot say this for anybody else because I've not done any sort of research or anything, but for me, from my observation of my own experience, depression is one of the furthest emotions away from me being my soul. So it is probably the furthest away that I could be from who I know I really am. And that emotion of depression is my indicator. Oh, you have walked so far away from me, soul, that now it's going to be a journey back. And I remember at 16 months, I walked outside of 16 months of postpartum depression and 16 months. And I walked out, and we lived in Florida at the time. It was always blue skies, sunny.
Oh my God, yeah.
But I walked outside and I looked up and I was like, when did the sky turn blue? Like, when did that happen? I mean, and I in 16 months, I was officiating weddings on the beach. I was doing little things that would bring in some income because I like to contribute to my household family, but like I was still taking care of the child. And so different than now. But anyways, yeah, I would officiate weddings. So I would be out on the beach watching sunset and everything, but I wasn't seeing it.
Yeah.
Because I was too far inward to express fully who I am. And so that's my definition of a state of depression.
Yeah.
Is that I have walked so far away from my soul.
That's one, actually, it's beautiful, but it's such a good analogy for what depression is, because you don't see what's around you. You can't even, feel
So depression, you
gratitude or
could also
joy.
look at it like suppression. Like you have
Yeah,
suppressed
yeah,
your soul. You suppressed the very essence of who you are.
yeah. And to speak to you have a child, and yeah, it changes everything about you. And there is that inner core of deep responsibility.
Mhm.
Now you are responsible for this other tiny human that has to rely on you for everything. And that's, I mean, that's huge. And I know, children, other people's children scare me. I'm not the one who you go into a room and, oh, let me hold the baby. No, that's fine. Show me a picture. Yeah, I'll just look from here. No, no, I don't want to touch the baby because God forbid I break it. We all have our little oddities, I suppose.
Yes.
But it's wonderful that you made it to that other side. And in all probability, I think doing those weddings on the beach and still contributing sort of gave you a little lifeline
Mhm.
that allowed you to find your way back.
Mhm. For sure. Yeah. And the second child, I had the support that I needed. I didn't feel alone. And I wasn't exclusively breastfeeding. She didn't want to. So it wasn't just all on me.
Right.
And I think if people like that and they thrive, like
Oh, yeah.
if they like to have everything on them and they like that responsibility and they thrive on that concept and that experience, then they may not experience what I did. I'm not like that. I like partnership.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when I do feel completely alone in doing anything, whew, it's just not, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
That's just me. So,
Yeah. And I think a good point there is people who are the Lesh League and are very much about being hands-on at all times. They are looking at it from a completely different perspective. They in some way prepared themselves to lose themselves, to become this other that was now totally in service to this little being.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not one of those. I adore my children, my grandchildren, but there is a certain trepidation. I don't want to say fear. It's not really fear, but there are so many things that can impact our children, impact our grandchildren that we don't have control over. And I guess I'm a bit of a control freak. Because there is so much we cannot control.
Mhm.
From a soul perspective, getting for people to get into depression other than postpartum,
Mhm.
to just fall into depression or suffer anxiety, or in my case, I had suicidal ideation since I was young. It
Yeah.
was just uh, it was a passing thought with everything.
Yeah.
I burned the toast. Oh, well, I can make new toast, or I can just end it. Like,
Yes.
that's a little extreme, but that,
No, I get what you're saying.
yeah,
I've experienced the same thing. So, I mean,
yeah,
I get it.
yeah. It was always sort of one of those options. And the one thing that it's really important for people to understand, because we think we're the only one ever who's ever felt whatever way we feel.
Mhm.
And I know I saw an interview a few months ago with um, Pete Buttigieg's husband, and he said he grew up thinking he was the only one ever who felt the way he did, who was different. And it was just such a telling moment because we all do that, no matter what the issue is for us, no matter whether it's big or small. When it's something that eats at our core, it's like we just assume we are in this bubble.
Mhm.
And I don't know, from a soul perspective, is that something you can work on? Is it something that is sort of intrinsic to certain types of people?
To feeling alone, is that what you're asking me? Does like from
Feeling,
a soul
yeah,
perspective? Okay.
being feeling that you must do say anything and everything that relates to your survival or your activity, your anything is only and all about you.
Oh, from a soul perspective, you are not from a soul perspective. If that's a very human, that's a very human experience, a human response. Because from a soul perspective, and it's almost like you come out of your human experience, your human body, and you can observe all the intricate connections with everyone, and then you realize that you are all one, and that you are all creation, and you are all this divine. And the human that's showing up, let's say you have a neighbor that drives you nuts, and they are just talking and being very negative and so forth and so on. You might be like, oh, this person is driving me nuts. But at the very core of who they are this divine creation. And there is an essence to them. They may have forgotten that essence. So it's not necessarily my responsibility to help this person survive, help them be happy, help them find. I mean, it's literally my soul's calling is to teach people to lead with their soul by listening to their divine guidance. I can channel one's soul's calling, why their soul came into their body during this lifetime. But even at that, it's not my responsibility to make them live it. And
Right.
so it's not, from a human perspective, we think we need to do whatever we need to do to make sure that these things happen. But when we step into the essence of ourselves, when we step into that life force energy of that which we are, all we realize is that we are actually energy and that we're vibrating. And whatever Spirit has told me several times, but initially it was just vibrate at what you desire, and it has no other option but to come to you. And you can repeat that. You can stop this pause, but vibrate at what you desire, and it has no other option but to come to you. That is recognizing that you are energy first and foremost. So when you're tending to your energy and you are focusing on your consciousness, your mindfulness, your energy, the essence of you, of who you are, then as that expands, you realize that you're not alone. You realize that you are one with everyone. So there is respect and honor that happens for that oneness that is within you. Then from that respect and honor, it permeates out into respecting and honoring others. So therefore, the conversations change. You care less. You forgive more. There's a state of Zen. And so even if you do go into a state of depression, state of loneliness, when you connect back to, you plug into, you can recognize. A little tip for those is just like, ooh, I feel this way. Who am I plugging into? Am I plugging into, like, view yourself like an outlet, like you're plugging into an outlet. And so if you're plugging into a neighbor who is depressed, are you plugging into an old story that was told, like the story that you said about your sister? Well, I didn't want my sister around. Well, that could be a whole nother emotional state that you're like, well, no, I actually did want her around. It just was the moment of her colic and I didn't like it. But then it was a story that was told over and over. And then you got defined as the sister that didn't want me. So then are you plugging into that story, which doesn't make you feel all that great? But then you said you're 65, so I can say it again. So now like you're 65 and you're not, let's say 6, because I don't know how old you were at the time, but you're not 6. But if you're plugging into your 6-year-old self who feels like Cockapee Poopashire, then you may come back to that energy and you're not plugging into divine. You're not plugging into your divine essence. You're not plugging into that oneness. And so then you lose a little bit of respect and honor for yourself. So then you may respond in a way to now your husband or the dogs or somebody else around you, a client, and be like, well, I do want to be around you. It was just and then you're like, oh, wait, I'm not even plugged into, I'm not even connected to the moment. Good. I'm plugged into the past. And so I'm not even being my soul. I'm being my 6-year-old self who felt like crap about my sister. Like, does this make sense?
It makes total sense. And just for clarity's sake, I am 67.
Oh,
I was 65 when my sister died.
Oh, okay.
And what you say, it rings so true, because I would make light of it as a joke. Mm-hmm. But there was a kernel of pain for her that I had felt that way. And I was 4.5. Mm-hmm. The other thing, unlike many other children, I had my mother, my father, my grandmother, and my aunt all to myself for 4 years. I had a lot of adults I could manipulate. So there was that too. But I understand what you're saying, and I think it's really important to get that when you know, and I guess my knowing came at 65. I started being much more present and relying on divine and soul for what I knew kept me where I need to be. Mm-hmm. And not getting myself so caught up in the human trappings.
Yeah. It was a big lesson that I had to learn. You're talking about human trappings, and one of mine is that I'm responsible for everybody else. I'm like responsible for other people's emotions. I'm responsible for their reaction. I'm responsible for their well-being. I'm responsible for their happiness. I'm responsible for their success, their business growth. And I have painfully had to learn. So if words don't usually teach, but maybe you can feel into the energy that I have released for those who are listening, that your only responsibility is to be in alignment with your soul, is for your own happiness, your own self, your own well-being, that you are saying yes to yourself, that you cannot give what you do not have. And it starts with you. And if you really want to know divine, and that could be, many people call divine something different. It could be God, source, creator, spirit, the universe, higher self, whatever you relate to. But if you really want to get to know divine, get to know yourself. And in that, you will understand that there is no separation, that there is this oneness, that you're never alone. And the moment that you feel alone on this journey in this lifetime, that is ego. And it's not edging God out. It's not something that's masculine and trying to like beat the devil out of you or whatever people say. Ego was formed between 7 and 11. It's part of your psychology. It's part of your psychic makeup. It's part of your being. And I keep in my mind, ooh, is this ego popping up and just trying to protect me? Because its whole purpose is to keep you safe. And so things that are out of its safety zone, out of the comfort zone, whoop, don't do that. Oh, don't make that sale, Sarah. They're not going to pay. That's way out of your comfort zone. Oh my goodness. Or don't let your husband love you that much. What if he dies? What if he lives? are you going to be able to love him even back? So ego is like kind of can be tricky because you're like, ooh, is that my soul? Is that ego? Which I have a whole lesson on. Like, is this a thought that I'm thinking versus the thought that I'm receiving? But just know that ego is formed. It's between 7 and 11. It's there to keep you safe. And so when you feel that those like alone in this moment, in this lifetime, on this journey, that is ego just trying to keep you safe. Something has entered your life experience that is at a higher elevated state than what you are currently vibrating at, which makes your being uncomfortable. And so, ooh, I'm going to just stay in this comfort zone. So then the ego will rise to the surface. But there's a question that it helps me. It's like, when I learned this, now my daughter is 9.5, but when I learned this, she was 6 or 6.5. And so I thought, ooh, okay, well, she's almost 7. Would I allow a 7-year-old to make my business decisions? Would I allow a 7-year-old to run my business? And I just related that to my ego. And so I was like, no, because it's not fully formed.
No.
But I also think that we're not taught how to be an adult and be our soul and be free, which is where I guess I was placed on this earth to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's such a good point. And to that, I'll put the question to you, because my understanding of ego and lizard brain and all of that comfort zone, the unfortunate thing is, because it forms when you're between 7 and 11, if the zone you ever knew was abuse or constant fighting with your parents and in a home of chaos, then that in fact will be your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the nervous system would rather live in its own hell than its own heaven, because it knows its own hell.
Yeah.
Rather than, and if comfort is your own hell, then you could not create your own heaven, because you're like, ooh, so then you have to work with, you have to work with the subconscious. You got to work with the ego. You have to, lovingly parent is how I put it. Lovingly parent the ego.
Yeah.
Because most of the time we're searching outside of ourselves for that comfort, for that support, for that guidance, to people who don't have the capacity to looking for people who don't understand, could not love us. I think a lot of times part of our own mental state and our states of depression, we are searching for people to love us in a way that we want to be loved, but they can only love in the way that they can love. And so if there is a misalignment in that and we're missing each other, we're in constant lack.
Yeah.
And then we think, oh, what's wrong with us? And I don't think that's necessary.
Such a good point. Such a good point. Like getting out of ego and paying more attention to the divine, I think we can conquer a lot more of the issues that we have. And I firmly believe that includes mental health and ideation and those things, because if you are consciously aware and taking the time to address how you're feeling, that aloneness, that separation, and pay more attention. Is there mantras, or are there exercises people can do to maybe, I don't know if the right word is snap them away from ego, or
oh goodness. So something, and this is coming from me, who I have dedicated my life to leading with my soul, because that's what I'm here to do. So I would say first and foremost, get to know your soul. like, if you're like, yeah, do I have a soul? Who is she? Who is he? Is it? I have no idea. I would get to know your soul. I would get to know the very essence of who you are. And it's more than a personality test. And it's more than a college applicant test, aptitude test, whatever that's called. Like I could manipulate the crap out of those tests, by the way, because I'm like, oh, I would like to go into this college and study this. So I'm going to check all these boxes. I know I wasn't going to be a mechanic or a truck driver. So sure as heck wasn't going to be marking those boxes,
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, that's still very human of me.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like, okay, who am I? Many people come to me asking, who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose? Those are the three questions that typically something has happened in their human experience, a death, a divorce, people leaving their house, like empty nesters, or they are starting new, or they've had lots of success and now they want more meaning and fulfillment. Like something has happened in their life that they're like, I want more. I need to know more. I'm meant for more. I feel like I'm extraordinary. I feel like there's a need for peace. There's joy. I want more of a connection. So that's when it's like, okay, I need to get to know who I really am. So I would start there, is getting to know your soul. And I mean, yes, of course, please reach out to me and I can take you through. There's numerous programs. There's one-on-one. There's channeling session. I mean, there's so much. There's books. There's just so much. So if you want like a guide to be like, where in the world do I start? I'm happy to talk. But for me, so once I know my soul, then the question that I ask myself is, am I in this moment, these emotions? Okay, what's going on? Why, for me, like if I want to go eat something that I know that my body's like, no bueno. And I don't speak Spanish. That's just something that I say. Like, just to be clear, this is not turning into like, I'm not bilingual by all means. But I just am like, okay, no bueno, I don't want that. Then I still am wanting it and needing it. So I check in with myself. What's going on? Like, why do I feel that? Like, what void am I trying to fill? And then I also ask myself, am I being more dedicated to my soul or to my fears right now?
Okay.
So I know I like bird walked all around your initial question, but that would be a question that I would ask myself. So if you don't know your soul, you're like, how can I be dedicated to my soul? So that's why I'm just saying, get to know your soul first and foremost. And then when you do, and you understand the essence of who you are and that energy, am I being more dedicated to my soul right now or to my fears? And I like dedicated words. Words matter. And so if you have issues with the word commitment, because humans have taught you that commitment doesn't happen, then you're being more dedicated to yourself. Like I like the word difference.
I love that. And yes, words are important. Mm-hmm. Words are critical in how we take in and what we put out. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And yeah, I did not mean to put you on the spot. You're giving exactly what it is that we need, because it's about like starting somewhere. And all of what you're saying is, I believe we need to make an effort to be more mindful, just moment to moment. Because I think that's how we lose ourselves in ego, because we just, I have had a spiritual advisor since 2004. And she always says, ego or lives your brain or whatever takes over. You're not in the driver's seat. Mm-hmm. And that's not what you want. You would not get in your car and sit in the back seat and let the car do its thing. I mean, we will soon, sadly, because because that analogy won't work anymore. But you wouldn't get in the car and get in the trunk and have no thought for your safety if you just let it willy-nilly go where it wants. And that in essence is what you're doing when you're not driving. And because it's your soul you need to be in contact with. And the ego serves a purpose. Yeah. I think for our human peace. I mean, we need that to sort of make our way. But as you become more mindful and as you pay more attention to your soul, do you find that you catch those lapses or those events where you're going into fear more readily or more quickly?
I was just having this thought this morning because I think I may be entering perimenopause.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, emotions are all over the place. I wake up from a panic of weird dreams, which sends me into anxiety. And I'm like, this is not ego. This is not spirit. This is not soul. This is my hormones all over the place.
Hormone soup.
So I'm like, something's happening here. So in that regards, like, I just want to say that because I still have a human experience with this. So typically I can recognize it rather frequently. Or quickly, not frequently, quickly. If, let's say, for instance, okay, I'll just say it. This past a year ago, I had released 30 pounds. And I was getting into a weight, getting close to my goal weight. And I say goal weight, and it wasn't like something that on a BMI chart. I asked my soul. I was like, soul, what is the body that you want to be housed in? What does this body eat? What's the solutions? What does this body weigh? What does it look like? Soul, what is the body that you want to be housed in? What is that like? And I got an image, I got the weight. So that's what I mean by goal weight. So I'm heading there. I did not realize that goal weight was the same weight I weighed when I abandoned myself. So ego took over, and I didn't realize it for many months. So I don't want to sit here and be like, oh yeah, I catch it frequently. And I ask this question and everything's great. Again, realness. Like I was focused. I was driven. I was very organized with my meals. Everything was great. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'll have a spoonful of Nutella. Oh, I'll have a few chips. It doesn't really matter. Like I was abandoning myself again. And I think myself, I look at it now as in my capital S self, my higher self, my soul. So am I abandoning my soul? Yes, you can. And I had a client say, yeah, you can. She's like, oh, I like the word abandon. She's like, you could look at, I'm abandoning old habits. I'm abandoning this past, these stories. I liked her take on it.
Yeah.
And also, I don't want to abandon myself anymore, which then turns back to, am I being more dedicated to my soul than to my fears? And I didn't realize that weight, that weight was what was even an issue. So I just said, I was like, is that why you, like, soul, like, is that why you, and it was like, yeah, you needed to heal that, or you would have continually abandoned me.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. I was like, is there a different weight? Now that we've healed this, now that I've committed to you and I don't want to abandon you anymore, what is that? And I got a different weight. And it was like, okay, cool. So I don't know if that helps or not, but I'm just.
It really does help. Okay, Sarah, because the question was more about me knowing and feeling. You were going to answer it honestly because it's important for all of us to understand that perfection doesn't exist. And it's not what we're aiming for. And you do this work and you are incredibly good at what you do. It just, I mean, I can feel your, I guess the word is strength in partnering with other people to present their souls. That's how I see it.
Mhm.
And that realness is sometimes what people need to hear. Because yes, it's what we aspire to. I so want to be absolutely hand in hand in league with my soul every moment of every day. And that is not realistic.
What needs to come up to heal and forgive will always come up, whether you recognize it or not.
Yeah.
And so the F is forgiveness, yes, in your show.
Yes.
And there was a moment in June, so last month, I don't know when this is going to come out, but most recently, that I realized I had not forgiven my husband for something that occurred probably 7-8 years ago. And I thought I had. And so I was like, why is this coming up again? And he mentioned it, and I just kind of like, whatever. But I realized I hung it over his head and I would bring things up. And I thought to myself, wow, there will never be a healing. There will never be freedom. And I think that's what we all want, is for freedom in to be ourselves, to explore, to journey, to go on adventures, to freedom to love, freedom to choose, freedom. And Spirit says to me, forgiveness equals freedom. And surrender equals success. And so my husband is screaming over here, energetically speaking, not actually screaming at me. He was like, all I want is to be free. And I was like, and energetically, I was like, what is he like? I know, and what I mean by energetically, I can feel people. Like I can feel what's going on. You're like, it's not like most of the time when I was younger, I would have stomach aches or back aches because I would be feeling what was going on around, but I didn't have words to express it.
Right.
But the more that I express divine, the stomach aches go away, the back ache, like it's all just, and we hold, and I know Louise Hay said probably this first, but we hold dis-ease in our body. And so if we haven't forgiven, if we're holding that guilt, where do you feel it in your body? And what do you need? Who do you need to forgive? It's not usually what, it's who. It's like, who is bothering you?
It's so good. And just so you and the audience understand, because I think I've talked about this before, but it is forgiveness. It is suicide Zen forgiveness, because the final for me was forgiving me. And it's a work in progress. It's definitely a work in progress. But the more I think about it, I think that's a big thing for all of us.
And I think in that suicide thoughts, you're abandoning self. And so that's the thing that I had to forgive. And that's like the weight loss and everything was, I am sorry, soul.
Yeah. Oh, well.
I'm sorry that I walked away from you. And I'm sorry that I didn't trust you. I'm sorry I didn't listen to you. You were guiding me every step of the way. And human Sarah, was like, nope, I know better.
Oh, yeah.
So I had to forgive myself, my human self, for abandoning my soul. And if soul doesn't resonate, maybe you abandon God. Maybe you abandon divine. Maybe you abandon Holy Spirit, Jesus, source, creator. I don't know what. resonates with people.
Yeah, whatever label you want to put.
And maybe abandon is too much. When did you walk away?
I definitely abandon fits me.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And the hubris of assuming I knew better than quite literally everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you talk about weight loss journeys. But, I have said I went so far with the diets and surgery, and that was a bust. I even had my throat slit. Now that was not intentional, but that's how far away from me I got. That all that could happen in search of what?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you come to be more connected with your soul, when you come to have a better understanding, and you start to forgive yourself. I forgave everybody else, and you know I had done that years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But when you come to forgive yourself and understand, you know, in some cases, in hindsight, it's just all so shallow. So, you know, the incredible conceit of our human parts that assume the entire world is focused on us. They have their own issues. We're really
Yes.
not that important.
Speaking of that, for an example, I bought a swimsuit that's it ties with strings, and you know,
Wow.
it's light blue, and I freaking love it. But I thought, oh, I've gained the 10 pounds that I didn't, you know, when I bought it, I was 10 pounds lighter, and you know, now there's a little bit more squeezing on me that my husband can grab onto. But I'm like, oh my. And so I wore it to the pool, and I was like, I'm going to wear this. I mean, it's just our community pool, you know, we live in a community. And I wore it, and I came home, and I didn't care. I just walked around like, who cares? Like, it's a swimsuit. I've got a body. Here I am. And I came home, and Craig says to me, so did anybody say anything? Like, you were afraid that someone was going to say something to you? I said, oh yeah, no one cared.
The only one focused on me, funny enough, was me.
Yeah, no one cared. They were playing with their children, or probably worried about their own looks in their own swimsuit, you know.
Absolutely.
No one came up to me like, wow, why are you wearing that with those thighs? You know, no one says that. They may have thought it, but you know, they didn't say anything.
And I have recently learned, or recently actually taken on board, other people's opinions are none of my business.
It's true. Because it just is showcasing, you know, our own opinions about other people. Is just showcasing our own
fears.
Our own confidence, our own fears, our own insecurities. Like it's the reflection, you know, is through our own lens, you know, of what's happening. So I'm not wording that correctly, but yeah, I hope you get the gist.
Yeah, you really are. And it's so funny because the ego, the humanness that we have. I'm going to tell you a quick little story. Right after my son was born, prior to me even considering weight loss surgery, I had put on a lot of weight after my accident. I was no longer able to do a lot of things, and had definitely put on a lot of weight, was very uncomfortable in who I was. And we had gone out for brunch to a place that we always went. And I had gone into the bathroom, and I was washing my hands, and this woman came out of a stall, and she looked at me in the mirror, and she said, "Oh my God, it's so sad. You're so beautiful. Why are you fat?
Holy balls.
Now,
Wow. Holy buckets.
that happened 41 years ago. That is the first time I have publicly said anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
It was such an assault because I was starting even then to learn that, not everything's about you. And it was just a whack. Oh, yeah, people really do. Now, in the hindsight, she probably spurred me to take a better look at me. Sadly, she spurred me to go have surgery in which I died twice.
Oh my
So
goodness.
that wasn't really good. And that then came the slit throat and all of that, in essence, because of one comment from someone I wouldn't know if I met her in my soup. Okay, I have no recollection of her face, but those words were etched on me, in me, for so long. And it's only recently that I decided, you know what, we're taking this out, we're going to shuffle it off because it does not serve. But that showed me, how deep down the rabbit hole you can go with ego and the fears that we hang on to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Here I thought that humans don't say that stuff. It's only online, but this woman 41 years ago
Yeah, there was no Snapchat, there was no Facebook, there was none of that. No, she was up close and personal behind me.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
And isn't it like in those moments, because did you think that, did you ever have that thought? Like, wow, you're so beautiful. Why are you so fat?
Not the so beautiful. No. The why are you so fat? Always.
Mm-hmm.
Always.
Because I had been why I asked that question is I had recently been like, am I being too much? Like, how am I showing up online? And I feel like I'm ready to be more in person for events and things. And so I'm like, okay, I was having my own fears about it. And then I gave a presentation and the feedback was, wow, you should really watch yourself. Sometimes you're just a lot. And I was like, okay, well, I had that concern. I know I'm very powerful. I'm glad that you said it out loud. Thank you. So my point is sometimes we have those thoughts about ourselves and just someone has said it out loud.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, because vibrating at what you desire and it has no other option but to come to you.
That's exactly.
Some, we think, oh, I need to vibrate at $1 million because that's really what I want. But sometimes we are vibrating or we're having thoughts. A thought is a vibration. And so we're having these thoughts and then they show up in our quote unquote real life. And we're like, oh, that's not what we wanted.
Yeah.
And somebody outside of ourselves says something to us that we've already thought about ourselves. And we're like, oh, yeah, hearing it out loud, that's not what I actually want.
Yeah. And not in tune enough back then, or at all, to what I could and would end up being. It just became like the thorn in the lion's paw. It was consistently, I stepped on that all day, every day.
Probably because that's how you were defining yourself. Is
Absolutely.
like you didn't anchor into, you didn't plug into your soul because you didn't know who your soul was. So then this is how I'm going to define myself as.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was just confirmation of what I considered was true.
Mm-hmm.
The second half. Notice I didn't hear the first half. It was that second half that was just for me confirmation. And in hindsight, that was what led me to go against my whole family and go have a surgery that no one else wanted to have. So it's really critical that we get to know our souls so that we don't live out our fears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right.
And at 67 years old, I'm here to say that it's never too late.
It is not.
And just, sometimes some of us are slow learners. But
I hear you.
well, I have to say, forgive me, I have kept you well over time. I think conversations with you are incredibly beneficial, and I know the audience has, I'm sure, taken some very much needed nuggets from this show today. Mm-hmm. We will have all of the information where you can contact Sarah and follow her on her socials and go check out her podcast and all of the that is the lovely Sarah Sparks. I cannot thank you enough. I do have to ask at some point, I would love to have you back.
Oh, yes, of course.
Excellent. Well, that has made my day.
Thank you for having me. I love having conversations and I love sharing. And sometimes, spirits told me not to necessarily talk about those times that I was suicidal or that I planned my own death. But that if it is beneficial for somebody else to know that, hey, I've had those thoughts, I worked through those thoughts, and what really saved me in those moments was reconnecting to my soul. And at the time, I didn't know that I even had gifts. I didn't know that I even had a soul, but I kept hearing these little internal nudges, like, you're meant for more. You're extraordinary. Extraordinary people do extraordinary things. Keep going. I believe in you. And I was like, wow. And at the time I was like, if something outside of myself can believe in me, I can figure out what I'm meant to do. And so I would just listen to those nudges that actually feel good. That feels so good that you're like, whoa, what was that? Not those nudges that make you feel really down and your heart hurt and your whole body just feels really heavy. Don't listen to those. But listen to the ones that really light you up and is like, wow, what was that? Where did that come from?
See, that's a wonderful indicator. That's a signpost for you. Does it make you feel good or does it make you feel bad? Mm-hmm. Definitely follow the good.
Yeah, follow the good.
Absolutely. So on that note, thank you very much for spending time with us here. I'm Elaine Lindsay. This is Suicide and Forgiveness. And as I say, we will see you next time. And meanwhile, make the very best of your today, every day. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe on your favorite service. Suicide Zen Forgiveness was brought to you by Truel Social Media, the digital integration specialists. Let them get you on page 1 in the search results.
And also by Canada's keynote humorist, Judy Croon, the motivational speaker, comedian, author, and stand-up coach at Second City. On the stage, Judy draws from her wealth of performance experience, wit, and insight to entertain, inform, and inspire in her dynamic keynotes and half-day workshops.